The chase in the market on the alien trade world of Kivros was always loud, crowded, and full of strange smells. Merchants shouted about their goods, mechanical carts rolled by, and creatures of many shapes and colors pushed past one. Another, Evan, a human trader, was there to buy ship parts and a few rare fruits for his trip home. He walked through the narrow paths between stalls, not paying much attention to the noise. But then he noticed something different. A young alien woman was moving quickly through the crowd. Her silver eyes darted left and right, her breathing fast. She clutched a torn cloak around herself like she was trying to disappear. Her long hair was tangled, her steps uneven like she had been running for hours. Evan didn't know her, but he could feel the fear rolling off her. Before he could think more, two large alien enforcers entered the market. They were both tall, their bodies covered in thick armor plates. Their glowing eyes scanned the crowd. Like hunting predators, one of them growled something into a comm device, and the other pointed toward the woman. Evan understood instantly they were after her. The woman glanced back, saw the enforcers, and panicked. She shoved past a merchant, knocking over a basket of glowing fruits. The stall owner yelled, but she didn't stop. Her path through the crowd was desperate, and she was heading straight for Evan. In the space of a breath, she collided with him. Her hands gripped his arm, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Please, don't let them take me." Evan blinked, unsure what was happening. But then she said the words that made his stomach twist. "I'll give you my body. Just hide me." Her voice was broken, like someone who had said those words before. It was the only thing she thought could buy her safety. Evan stared at her, confused and angry at the same time. He had seen cruelty before in the galaxy, but hearing her offer herself so quickly told him she had lived through worse. The enforcers were close now, their heavy steps shaking the wooden planks underfoot. One shouted in a harsh voice, "Human, have you seen this runaway?" Evan felt the woman's grip tighten, her breath quick against his arm. He made a quick choice. "No," he said evenly. "I haven't seen anyone like that." The enforcers stared at him for a moment. One stepped closer, looking into his eyes, as if trying to read his mind. But the noise of the market and the press of the crowd made them impatient. They muttered something in their language and moved past him. Still scanning for their target, when they were gone, Evan looked at the woman again. She was still holding his arm like she was afraid he would vanish. "You need to move," he said quietly. "Follow me." She nodded quickly, too scared to speak. He led her through the market, weaving between stalls and turning down smaller side paths. After several minutes, they reached a quieter area near the docking bays. The smell of machine oil replaced the scents of spices and cooked meat from the market. Evan opened the hatch to his small transport ship and gestured for her to get inside. The woman hesitated, looking at him as if she was still expecting him to name his price. "Go," he said firmly. "You're safer in here." She climbed aboard, glancing over her shoulder with every step. When the hatch closed, the noise of the market faded away. For the first time, Evan could really see her. Her skin had a faint golden tone that seemed to catch the light. Her silver eyes were still wide with fear. The cloak she wore was torn and dirty, the fabric barely holding together. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Evan grabbed a water flask from a shelf and handed it to her. She took it with trembling hands. Drinking quickly. "You didn't have to lie for me," she said softly. "Maybe not," Evan replied. "But I wasn't going to let those thugs drag you away." Her gaze dropped to the floor. "No one helps for free," she said, almost like she was warning him. Evan didn't answer. He just turned on the ship systems and began prepping. For departure, the woman wrapped the cloak tighter around herself. Evan noticed her eyes flick to him every now and then. She seemed unsure if he was her rescuer or just another person who would eventually demand something. Evan kept his focus on the controls, but inside, his mind was turning. Those enforcers weren't just random guards, they were working for someone dangerous. As the engines powered up, Evan thought about what he'd just done. He had stepped into a stranger's fight without knowing the details, and on a world like Kivros, that could be the kind of mistake that got you killed. But when he remembered the desperation in her voice, he knew he couldn't have done anything else. Somewhere deep in the market, the enforcers were still searching. Evan had no idea how far their reach extended, but he was certain of one thing: this wasn't over. The woman sitting in his ship carried trouble with her, and now that trouble was his too. Asterisk inside the small transport ship. The hum of the engines was steady. Outside, the docking bay doors opened slowly, revealing the endless dark of space. Evan kept his hands on the controls, guiding the ship up and away from Kivros beside him. The alien woman sat stiffly in the co-pilot seat, her cloak still pulled tight around her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she turned her head and asked quietly, "Where are we going?" Evan glanced at her. "Away from here," he said. "Somewhere those men can't find you." Her silver eyes searched his face, as if trying to figure out what he wanted in return. "You don't know me," she said, her voice hesitant. "You? Didn't have to help." "Yeah," Evan replied. "Maybe I didn't." She looked away, and for a second her shoulders relaxed, but then, almost nervously, she began to unfasten her cloak. Evan frowned. "What are you doing?" "This is what you want, isn't it?" she said, her voice trembling but matter-of-fact. "You saved me, and now I repay you." That's how it works. Her fingers moved to the fastening on the simple tunic beneath. Evan's hand shot out, stopping her. "No," he said firmly. "That's not why I helped you." She froze, blinking at him. "No one helps without taking something," she said, her tone flat, almost like it was a lesson she'd learned long ago. Evan leaned back in his seat, still watching her. "Well, I'm not no one," he said. "I don't need payment like that." Her brow furrowed, as if she couldn't understand the words he was saying. "You don't want me?" she asked slowly. Evan sighed. "I want to get you somewhere safe." Her lips parted slightly, as though safety was a word she hadn't heard in a long time. After a moment, she pulled her cloak back around herself and sank into the seat. Evan reached for the overhead compartment and took out a ration pack. "Here," he said, tossing it to her. She caught it clumsily. Staring at it like it was a strange treasure, she opened the pack, and the smell of warm bread and protein stew filled the small cabin. Her hands shook slightly as she began to eat. Evan noticed the way she took small bites at first, like she wasn't sure there would be more. "You can slow down," he said. "There's enough." But she just shook her head and kept eating. When the meal was gone, she wiped her hands on the edge of her cloak. "My name is Sira," she said quietly. "Evan," he replied. She nodded slowly, as if committing the name to memory. Evan adjusted the ship's course, heading toward a safe port in a nearby system. But before they could enter hyperspace, a blinking light flashed on the comm panel. He tapped it, and a grainy hologram appeared, the face of a tall, sharp-featured alien with cold eyes. "Human," the voice said, dripping with authority. "You have something that belongs to me." Evan said nothing, his jaw tightening. Sira's eyes widened, and she shrank back into her seat. The alien continued, "Return the girl, Tia, and we will forget your interference. Refuse, and we will hunt you." The message ended abruptly, leaving the cabin in tense silence. Evan turned to Sira. "Who was that?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "A traitor," she said. "They deal in people." She swallowed hard. "If they catch me, they'll sell me to the highest bidder, and I'll never see freedom again." Her words were heavy, the truth in them making Evan's chest feel tight. Evan looked at the controls, then at Sarah. He could turn back, hand her over, and walk away, but the thought made him feel sick. Instead, he said, we're not going back. Sierra stared at him, her expression caught between disbelief and something like hope. You don't understand. She said quickly, they never stop. Once they choose someone, they keep hunting. Until they get them, then we'll make sure they can't. Evan replied. Her lips trembled, and she looked down, hiding her face behind her hair. He set the coordinates for a long jump into hyperspace. The ship vibrated slightly as the engines powered up for the jump. Evan could still feel her eyes on him, trying to figure him out. He didn't know where this was going, but he knew one thing. He couldn't just drop her somewhere and forget about her when the ship leaped into hyperspace. The streaks of starlight stretched across the windows. Sierra let out a shaky breath, as if the sight gave her a moment of relief. But deep down, Evan knew the traitor's message wasn't a threat to be ignored. This was only the beginning. The hum of hyperspace filled the small transport. Evan sat in the pilot's chair, watching the endless streaks of light outside. Sierra sat silently beside him, her hands hidden under her cloak, her eyes fixed on the floor. She hadn't spoken. Since the traitor's hologram appeared, finally, Evan broke the silence. You're safe for now. Her silver eyes lifted, searching his face. No one is safe from them, she said softly. Her words carried the weight of experience. She had seen what these traitors could do. Evan leaned back in his seat. Tell me more. Sierra hesitated, then shook her head. It doesn't matter. You'll just drop me somewhere and go back to your life. That's not my plan, Evan replied. She blinked at him, unsure whether to believe him. Before she could respond, a sharp alarm sounded from the console. Evan checked the readings. An incoming transmission on a locked frequency. He tapped the control, and the same cold-eyed alien appeared again in shimmering blue light. Human, the voice hissed. I warned you. The traitor's tone was... But there was a deadly promise behind every word. You have interfered with my property, he continued. Return her, or I will strip your ship apart and sell you for parts. Evan's jaw tightened. She's not your property, he said. The alien leaned forward in the hologram, his face filling the screen. Everything is property, if it has value. Sierra flinched at the words, pressing herself deeper into the chair. Evan kept his voice steady. I'm not giving her to you. The traitor smiled slowly. Then you will regret it. The hologram vanished, leaving the cabin dark except for the glow of the instruments. Sierra's breathing was shaky. You shouldn't have said that. Evan turned to her. I meant it. She shook her head. You don't understand. They have hunters. They'll track us across the galaxy. Evan checked the nav readings. Then we'll just have to stay ahead of them. But his confidence faded when the sensors beeped again. A red icon flashed. A ship was following them in hyperspace, matching their speed exactly. They're already here, Sarah whispered. Evan adjusted the power settings, preparing for an early drop out of hyperspace. They'll try to corner us when we exit. He muttered, more to himself than to her. He thought fast. There was a mining sector nearby, filled with asteroid fields and old drilling stations, perfect for hiding if you knew how to navigate it. He punched in the coordinates and prepared the ship. With a sudden jolt, they dropped out of hyperspace, stars snapping back into view almost immediately. A shadow emerged behind them, a sleek black vessel with curved fins and red running lights. Hunter ship, Sierra said, her voice trembling. Evan's hands moved quickly over the controls. Let's see if they can keep up, he pushed. The engine's too full, diving toward the jagged asteroid field ahead. The hunter ship followed, weaving between the rocks with deadly precision. Evan swerved hard, scraping the edge of a huge asteroid. Sierra gripped the armrests, her eyes wide as debris spun past the cockpit windows. They won't stop, she said. Not until they have me. Evan glanced at her. Why you? What makes you so important to them? She hesitated, then whispered, my bloodline. My clan controls old star rights. Whoever owns me can claim whole systems. Evan understood instantly. She wasn't just valuable, she was priceless to the wrong kind of people. "That's why they'll never quit," he said. She nodded, her expression haunted. Evan pulled the ship into a narrow tunnel through a cluster of asteroids. The hunter ship tried to follow, but a chunk of rock clipped one of its wings, forcing it to pull back. Evan didn't wait. He pushed deeper into the field until the scanner showed no sign of pursuit. For a few minutes, only the sound of the engines filled the cabin. Evan finally eased the throttle. Letting the ship drift behind a massive asteroid, Sira exhaled slowly. "You could have left me. They would have stopped chasing you." Evan looked at her, his voice calm but firm. "That's not how I live." She stared at him like she was trying to understand something foreign. In her world, kindness always had a cost, but this man wasn't asking for anything. It made her uneasy, but also curious. Evan knew they had only bought themselves a little time. The traitors would regroup, send more hunters, maybe even a full strike team if he was going to keep her safe. They needed a place where the traitors' influence was weak. His mind went to one possibility: a frozen moon on the edge of an unclaimed sector, a place even the worst criminals avoided. He set the course, glancing once at Sira. She was watching him closely now. Her fear still there, but mixed with something else, a fragile hope. Evan didn't say anything more. The engines roared, and the ship slipped quietly back into hyperspace. The streaks of hyperspace stretched endlessly in front of the cockpit. Evan sat in the pilot's chair, his hands tight on the controls. Sira sat beside him, silent. Her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders. For a while, neither spoke. The steady hum of the engines filling the space, Evan's mind was fixed on the frozen moon he had chosen as their next destination. It was remote, dangerous, and barely inhabited, but that was exactly why it might keep them safe. Still, he knew the traitors would not give up. They had already sent one hunter, and more would be on the way. A sharp beeping cut through the quiet. Evan glanced at the scanner, his chest tightened. 3 new contacts had appeared behind them. Closing fast, "They found us again," Sira whispered, her voice trembling. Evan pushed the throttle forward, but the pursuing ships matched his speed easily. "These aren't hunter ships," Evan muttered. "They're armed escorts." Sira's eyes widened. "Then they'll try to disable us. Not destroy us, because they want you alive," Evan said grimly. He reached for the weapons panel. Switching the ship's defensive systems online, the escorts opened fire. Bright streaks of plasma flashing past the cockpit windows. Evan swerved hard to avoid the blasts, the ship's frame rattling under the strain. Sira gripped the edge of her seat, her knuckles pale against her golden skin. "Can you outrun them?" she asked. "Not in open space," Evan replied. "We need cover." He scanned the nearby star map and spotted a dense asteroid belt just ahead. "Hold on," he said, pushing the engines to maximum. The escorts followed, their weapons lighting up the darkness like a deadly storm. One blast grazed the side of Evan's ship, making alarms scream through the cabin. The smell of burnt metal filled the air. "Shields are down to 60%, Sira said, reading the display. Evan dove into the asteroid field, weaving between massive chunks of rock. The escorts followed, but their formation broke apart as they struggled to avoid collisions. Evan spotted a narrow tunnel between 2 spinning asteroids and shot through it. One escort clipped the edge and spiraled away, but the other 2 pressed on. He rolled the ship hard to the left, sliding into the shadow of a massive rock. For a moment, the scanners lost their signal. But then one escort reappeared behind them. "Firing again, front shields at 30%, Sira warned. Evan clenched his jaw. Firing back with the ship's pulse cannons, a volley of shots hit the escort's wing, sending it spinning into a smaller asteroid. Only one enemy remained now, but it was the fastest. It stuck to them like a predator refusing to lose its prey. A sudden impact shook the ship violently. Warning lights flashed red. The enemy had scored a direct hit on the rear thrusters. Engines are failing. Sierra said, panic in her voice. Evan gritted his teeth. We're not dead yet. He spotted a small, icy moon at the far edge of the asteroid field. If we can land there, we might shake them, he said. Adjusting course, the last escort kept firing. Trying to disable them completely before they could reach the surface, Evan zigzagged through. The remaining asteroids each turn risking another collision. A blast tore across their left wing, and Sierra cried out as sparks rained into the cockpit. Evan hit the emergency descent thrusters, and the ship plunged toward the frozen moon's surface. The escort followed, firing one last time before breaking off. The shots slammed into their hull, tearing through the rear section. The ship spun wildly as Evan fought for control. The white surface of the moon rushed toward them. Sierra held onto her seat, eyes wide with terror. Evan pulled hard on the controls, leveling the ship just enough to avoid a fatal crash. They hit the ice with a bone-rattling thud, skidding across the frozen ground until the ship came to a stop. The cabin was filled with the hiss of steam from ruptured pipes. Evan coughed, unstrapping himself. You okay? Sierra nodded shakily, though her hands still trembled. He checked the damage. The engines were dead, and the power cells were running low. We're not flying anywhere until I fix this, Evan said. Sierra glanced out the window at the endless, icy plain. Do you think they'll come back? Evan's voice was steady but grim. If they know we're here, yes. He grabbed a thermal jacket from the storage compartment and handed her one as well. We need to find shelter before. The temperature drops too much, he said. Sierra hesitated. Leave the ship. If they send more, the ship will be the first place they look, Evan replied. She pulled the jacket around her and followed him out. The cold hit them instantly, biting through even the thick fabric. The wind howled across the empty plain. Carrying fine snow that stung their skin, Evan spotted a ridge in the distance with what looked like cave openings. He pointed toward it. There. They moved quickly, their boots crunching against the ice. As they reached the ridge, Sierra looked back at the ship. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought. You didn't have to save me, she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the wind. Evan glanced at her. Yeah, I did. And then they stepped into the shadow of the cave, unaware that something, or someone was already watching from deeper inside. The cave was dark and cold. Evan switched on a small wrist light, the beam cutting through the shadows. Sierra followed close behind, her eyes darting to every sound. Their footsteps echoed softly against the icy walls as they moved deeper inside. The wind outside faded until it was only a faint whisper. The tunnel curved sharply, leading into a wide chamber lit by faint glowing crystals in the walls. Evan paused, his instincts warning him they weren't alone. Sierra froze too, her silver eyes scanning the darkness. Then a voice came from the shadows. Low and cautious, stop where you are. Figures stepped into the light, tall, fur-lined cloaks covering their bodies, faces hidden behind bone masks. Each one carried a spear-like weapon made from a mix of metal and carved ice. Evan slowly raised his hands, showing he wasn't a threat. Sierra's breath caught as she looked at them. The one in front spoke again. You are trespassing on clan. A car's ground, Sierra stepped forward before Evan could speak, pulling something from beneath her cloak. It was a small necklace with a silver pendant shaped like a star. When the masked leader saw it, he stopped, lowering his weapon slightly. You are blood of the Starborn, the leader asked. Sierra nodded, her voice soft but steady. My mother was of the Starborn line. A murmur went through the group. The tension in the air shifting, the leader gestured for them to follow. Evan exchanged a glance with Sierra, then stepped forward cautiously. They were led through winding tunnels deeper underground. The air grew warmer, and soon the sound of voices echoed ahead. When they emerged into a huge cavern, Evan couldn't believe his eyes. There was an entire settlement hidden inside the ice, small huts carved into the walls, bridges made of woven rope, and fires burning in stone pits. Children ran between the huts, stopping to stare at the newcomers. Syrah's shoulders relaxed slightly for the first time since he'd met her. "This is a hidden village," she whispered to Evan. "They keep themselves secret so the traders cannot find them." The leader led them to a central fire where two elders sat in a half circle, their masks more elaborate than the others. Syrah bowed her head, showing respect. The elders studied her quietly, then turned their eyes to Evan. "Why is a human here?" One of them asked. Evan met their gaze without flinching. "I'm trying to keep her safe." An elder leaned forward. "Safe from who?" Syrah answered, "The trader gangs. They are hunting me." Her voice trembled only slightly, but the elders exchanged worried looks. One of them spoke gravely. "If they know she is here, they will come. And they will not stop until they take her," the leader of the warriors added. "Our walls can hold against raiders, but the traders bring ships and fire from the sky." Evan felt the weight of their words. Hiding here might put the entire village in danger. The elders debated quietly among themselves. Finally, the oldest among them spoke. "You may stay for now, but you must not bring the enemy to our gates." Evan nodded, understanding the risk they were taking. Syrah lowered her head in gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. They were given a small hut carved into the side of the cavern. Inside, it was warm from a fire pit in the center. The walls lined with furs. Syrah sat near the fire, her hands outstretched to the heat. Evan sat across from her, his mind restless. "You've been here before, haven't you?" Evan asked. Syrah shook her head. "No. But my mother told me of them." Her voice softened. "She said if I was ever in danger, I should find Clan Akar. They would help me." Evan studied her face, wondering how much she still wasn't telling him. Hours later, a young warrior entered the hut with food, roasted meat, and a thick stew. Syrah ate slowly this time, not rushing like before. Evan kept glancing at the door, his instincts telling him that this peace wouldn't last. He was right. That night, while the village slept, a horn sounded in the distance, deep and urgent. Evan sat up instantly, grabbing his jacket. Syrah was already awake, her face pale. "That's a warning horn," she whispered. "Someone's coming." They stepped outside, and Evan saw warriors gathering near the main gate of the cavern. The elder leader was there, speaking quickly to his fighters. A scout ran in, panting from the cold, to ships approaching from the east sky. Evan's stomach sank. The traders had found them. The leader turned to Evan. "If they want her, they will attack without mercy." Evan's voice was steady. "Then we'll fight." Syrah looked at him in shock. "You can't fight an army." Evan met her gaze. "I'm not going to let them take you." The warriors began preparing defenses, barricades of ice, archers with energy-tipped arrows, and traps hidden along the tunnels. Evan inspected the walls, looking for weak points. He had fought before, and he knew the traders would try to breach fast and overwhelm if they could hold long enough. Maybe, just maybe, they could win. But deep down, Evan knew this battle would decide more than just their safety if they lost here. Syrah's freedom and maybe her life would be gone forever. The cold air inside the hidden village was tense. Every warrior of Clan Akar stood ready at the main gate, their weapons glowing faintly in the dim light. Evan tightened the strap of the borrowed armor they had given him. It was heavier than what he was used to, but it would have to do. Syrah stood nearby, her silver eyes fixed on the distant sound of engines in the night sky. "You should hide," Evan told her, his voice calm but firm. She shook her head. "If they take me, they'll destroy this place anyway." Evan frowned, but he didn't have time to argue. The first shadow appeared above the icy cliffs, a sleek black trader dropship, its red lights cutting through the darkness. A second one followed, then a third. The warriors muttered under their breath, gripping their spears tighter. Evans' stomach nodded. 3 dropships meant at least 30 armed men, maybe more. The leader of the warriors raised his hand, signaling for silence. The dropships slowed as they neared the village entrance, hovering like vultures from the largest one. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "Return the Starborn girl, and no one else will be harmed." Evans stepped forward, his voice carrying. Across the frozen air, "She's not yours." The voice on the speaker laughed. Cold and mocking, "Everything valuable belongs to the highest bidder." At the signal, the dropships opened their side doors. Lines of armored men rappelled down, weapons gleaming under the moonlight. The first wave charged toward the village. Evan ducked behind an ice barricade and fired the borrowed pulse rifle. Beside him, Akar warriors launched arrows tipped with crackling energy. The traders returned fire, plasma bolts striking the barricades and sending shards of ice into the air. Sira watched from the shadows of a hut, her hands clenched tightly around the pendant necklace. She wanted to run, to hide, but every instinct told her to stay where. She could see Evan. The sound of battle shook the cavern. Evan shouted orders, directing warriors to cover weak points. He moved fast, firing, reloading, and never staying in one spot for too long. A group of traders broke through a side passage. Trying to flank the defenders, Evan saw them and sprinted across the icy ground, sliding into cover before they could fire. With quick aim, he took down the first 2. And the remaining 3 were stopped by Akar spears. The warriors nodded at him with respect. Evan didn't return the smile. There was no time for it. The traders kept coming, wave after wave. They used smoke charges to blind the defenders. Forcing the fight closer, Evan found himself face to face with one of them. The man swung a blade, and Evan blocked with his rifle, shoving the trader back before delivering a hard punch to the gut. The man went down, but another took his place immediately. Up on a cliff above the entrance, an Akar scout sounded a sharp horn, another warning. Evan looked up and saw a new threat, the leader of the traders himself, stepping off the largest dropship. He wore dark armor with silver patterns and tay. His cold eyes locked straight on Sira. Even through the chaos, Evan could feel the shift. This was the moment the fight would turn. The trader leader raised his arm, signaling his men to push harder. Evan grabbed a fallen warrior's shield and rushed forward. Slamming into the line of enemies, he fought his way toward the leader, knowing if he could take him down, the others might break. But the leader wasn't unprotected. 2 massive bodyguards stepped in, swinging heavy axes. Evan barely dodged. The first strike, the blade biting into the ice where he had stood. He rolled, came up firing, and managed to drop one of them. The other roared and charged, but an Akar warrior leaped from the side and brought him down. Now there was nothing between. Evan and the leader, they clashed in the middle of the icy courtyard, plasma blade against pulse rifle. The leader's strength was overwhelming, each strike forcing Evan back. But Evan fought with desperate focus. He wasn't just protecting Sira, he was protecting everyone here. Then a sound cut through the chaos, a high, sharp tone that wasn't from the battle. Evan glanced back and saw Sira holding her pendant high. It was glowing bright silver, pulsing like a heartbeat. The traders hesitated, some stepping back in fear. From somewhere deep in the mountains, a low rumble began. Moments later, lights appeared in the sky, a fleet of ships approaching fast. The battle was over. The air above the hidden village was quiet again. The only sound, the soft hum of the Allied ships hovering in the distance. Snowflakes drifted slowly from the cliff tops. Covering the ground where the fight had been, Evan stood near the main gate, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. The Akar warriors were tending to the wounded, dragging broken weapons and shattered barricades away. Sira stood among them, her silver eyes scanning the faces, making sure no one she knew had been lost when her gaze found Evan. She walked toward him. Her cloak was torn, and there was dirt on her cheek. But she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had faced fear and survived. "You're hurt," she said softly, noticing the bruise on his jaw. "Alive," Evan replied, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. The leader of the Akar clan approached, removing his bone mask. "You fought well, human," he said, his voice respectful. "You are welcome among us as a friend." Evan nodded. "Thank you." The elder glanced at Sarah, then back to him. "She is safe here now. If you wish to go." Evan looked at Sarah, and she looked back, her eyes unreadable. He thought about the past few days, the market, the chase, the hunters, the frozen moon, and this battle. Leaving her here would mean she'd be with her people. But it also meant he'd be walking away from someone he had risked everything for. Sarah seemed to sense what he was thinking. She stepped closer, her voice quiet so only he could hear. "If you go, I won't see you again." Evan swallowed. "You'd be safe." She shook her head. "Safe doesn't mean anything if I lose the only person who saw me as more than a price tag." He didn't know what to say to that before he could speak. She reached into her cloak and pulled out the silver star pendant. "This is a bond mark," she said. "When I give it to someone, it means they are my chosen, my family." She pressed it into his hand. "I want you to keep it." Evan stared at the pendant, feeling its weight. "I didn't save you to make you owe me anything," he said. "I know," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "That's why I'm giving it to you." For a long moment, he just looked at her, then he closed his fingers around the pendant and slipped it into his pocket. "You're stubborn," he said quietly. A faint smile curved her lips. "And you're stuck with me now." The Allied ships began to leave, their engines rumbling softly as they rose into the night sky. The Akar warriors returned to their homes, their laughter and voices slowly replacing the tension of the battle. Sarah gestured toward a small hut. "On the far side of the village, it's empty," she said, "and it's warm. You could stay there." Evan glanced at the hut, then at the exit tunnel that led back to the frozen plain where his damaged ship rested. He thought about fixing the ship and disappearing into the stars, going back to the life of a wandering trader. But when he looked at Sarah again, he knew he wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That night, they sat by the fire inside the hut. Sarah poured him a cup of warm, spiced drink, her movements slower now that the danger had passed. Evan leaned back, feeling the warmth seep into his tired body. "You really thought I was going to take that deal in the market?" he asked suddenly. She looked down, her fingers tightening on her cup. "Everyone takes it. No one ever says no." Evan shook his head. "Then they've been asking the wrong people." Her eyes lifted to his, and for the first time since they'd met, her smile was unguarded. "You gave me a home when I had nothing," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You gave me something too," Evan replied. "A reason to stop running from my own past." They stayed by the fire for hours, talking about little things, her life before the traders, his travels across the galaxy, the food they each missed from home. The fear that had been in Sarah's voice for days was gone now, replaced by a quiet confidence. Evan didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe the traders would try again. Maybe the galaxy would find another way to throw trouble at them. But tonight, in this small, warm hut, they weren't running when the fire burned low. Sarah set her cup aside and looked at him. "Whatever comes next," she said, "I'm not going to face it alone anymore." Evan nodded. "Neither am I." And for the first time in years, he felt like he had stopped drifting. Not because of the village or the battle, but because someone had chosen to stand with him, and he had chosen to stand with her. Not as a bargain, not as a debt, but as something far better, a home.